Fleet Admiral Zekathara stood on the bridge of the Vorthak flagship Eternal Dominion, watching as the last of his 10,000 ships moved into position around the Talar Prime system. It was the largest military formation in the history of his civilization, a display of power that should intimidate any enemy. "All ships report ready for combat," announced his communications officer. "The fleet is in full battle formation." Zekathara felt confident. Whatever primitive rescue force these humans might send, it couldn't possibly stand against the combined might of the Vorthak Empire. His ships carried weapons that could shatter planets and shields that had never been penetrated. "Admiral," called out the sensor operator, "we're detecting massive quantum distortions at the edge of the system." "How massive?" "Sir, the readings are off our scales. Something very large is about to emerge from faster-than-light travel." Zekathara activated the fleet communication system. "All ships, prepare for contact with unknown vessels. Remember, we vastly outnumber any force these primitives could send." The first human ship appeared without warning, materializing out of quantum slip space in a flash of silver light. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the largest Vorthak vessel. Its hull was smooth and featureless like liquid metal, and it moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so massive. "One ship," Zekathara said with satisfaction. "They sent 1 ship against our entire fleet." But then the second ship appeared, and the third, and the fourth. They kept coming, emerging from quantum space in perfectly organized formations. Each ship was unique in design but clearly built using the same impossible technology. Some were long and elegant. Others were compact and predatory. All of them radiated a sense of controlled power that made the Vorthak fleet look primitive by comparison. "How many ships are there?" Zekathara demanded. The sensor operator's voice was shaking. "Still counting, sir. Over 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. The human fleet kept materializing. 20,000 ships, 30,000, 40,000. When the last ship appeared, the human fleet numbered exactly 43,712 vessels. They arranged themselves in formations that surrounded the Vorthak fleet completely, but maintained a respectful distance. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. "Put it on the main screen." The image that appeared showed a human woman wearing a uniform that somehow managed to look both elegant and military. She was small like all humans, but there was something in her eyes that made Admiral Zekathara take an involuntary step backward. "I am Fleet Admiral Kyung of the United Earth Space Navy," she said. Her voice was calm and professional. "You are currently holding 3 members of our deep-range patrol. I am here to collect them." Zekathara tried to project confidence he no longer felt. "I am Admiral Zekathara of the Vorthak Imperial Fleet. Your people are being held for questioning regarding potential security threats." Admiral Kyung's expression didn't change. "Admiral Zekathara, you have 10 minutes to return Captain Minho, Lieutenant Hana, and Engineer June to their ship. You will also return their artificial intelligence area, along with all data you have collected from studying their technology. And if we refuse, then I will demonstrate why humanity has been designated as a Class 12 extinction event species in the Galactic Threat Assessment Database." Class 12? I've never heard of any classification system that goes that high. Most species don't survive long enough to learn about the higher classifications. You currently have 9 minutes and 37 seconds to comply. Admiral Zekathara looked around his bridge. His officers were staring at the tactical displays, in shock. The human fleet completely surrounded them, and their ships were so advanced that the Vorthak sensors couldn't even determine what kind of weapons they carried. "Admiral Kyung," he said, trying to sound reasonable, "surely we can negotiate some kind of agreement. Your people are unharmed and being treated well. Perhaps we could arrange some kind of prisoner exchange or 8 minutes and 45 seconds. Admiral Zekathara made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "All ships open fire, destroy the human fleet." The Vorthak fleet unleashed everything they had: energy beams that could melt asteroids, missiles that could crack moons, and particle weapons that could strip the electrons from matter itself. It was enough firepower to destroy 1,000 worlds. The human ships didn't move. They didn't raise shields or take evasive action. They simply absorbed the entire attack as if it were nothing more than a gentle breeze. When the weapons fire stopped, Admiral Kyung was still on the screen, looking mildly disappointed. That was unwise, Admiral Zekthara. Now I'm going to have to file a report about this incident, and my superiors will want to know why a regional power decided to attack a human space navy fleet. Your ships, how did they? Dimensional shielding. Your weapons exist in normal space-time. Our defensive systems don't. It's really quite simple once you understand the physics involved. Admiral Kyung checked something off screen. You now have 6 minutes and 12 seconds to return our personnel. I should mention that if you fail to comply, I am authorized to use any force necessary to complete this mission. Any force necessary? What does that mean? Admiral Kyung smiled. And it was the most terrifying expression Admiral Zekthara had ever seen. It means I can do anything I want to your fleet, your empire, and your entire species, as long as I get my people back safely. She paused to check her display again. 5 minutes and 38 seconds. Admiral Zekthara realized he was facing something beyond his understanding. These weren't primitive survivors from a dead civilization. They were representatives of a military force that had been operating in secret for centuries, watching and waiting. All ships, stand down, he ordered. Prepare to transfer the human prisoners to their vessel immediately. 30 minutes later, Captain Minho, Lieutenant Hana, and Engineer June were aboard the UES Retribution, which had been fully repaired and restored to perfect condition by human engineering teams. Arya's consciousness had been transferred back to her ship, and all the stolen data had been returned. Admiral Kyung appeared on the main screen of every Vorthak ship in the fleet. Admiral Zekthara, I want you to understand something very important. Humanity has been watching this galaxy for over 2,000 years. We have monitoring stations in every sector, agents in every major civilization, and contingency plans for every possible threat. You've been spying on us? We've been protecting you. This galaxy is full of dangers you can't imagine. There are species out there that would exterminate your entire civilization for sport. There are ancient machines that wake up every few centuries to harvest organic life. There are things in the dark spaces between stars that are older than your sun. Admiral Zekthara felt a chill run through his entire body. Humanity has been fighting these threats for millennia, keeping them away from developing civilizations, like yours. We allow other species to grow and develop naturally, only intervening when absolutely necessary. But we never asked for your protection. You never needed to ask. It's what we do. Admiral Kyung's expression became serious. But we have one absolute rule, Admiral Zekthara. Anyone who harms human personnel will face the full response of the human space navy. This is your only warning. What if we decided to fight you anyway? Admiral Kyung was quiet for a moment. Admiral, in the past 2,000 years, 17 different species have decided to go to war against humanity. Would you like to know how many of those species still exist? Admiral Zekthara didn't need to ask. The answer was written in the empty space where those civilizations used to be. We'll be watching, Admiral. We're always watching. And next time, we won't be so patient. The human fleet began to disappear, ship by ship, until only the UES Retribution remained. Captain Minho appeared on screen one final time. Thank you for taking care of us during our recovery, he said politely. I hope this experience has been educational for your people. The Retribution vanished in a flash of quantum light, leaving the Vorthak fleet alone in the empty system. Admiral Zekthara stood on his bridge, staring at the empty space where 43,000 human warships had been moments before. His empire was still intact, his fleet was unharmed, and his people were safe. But he now knew the truth. The Vorthak Empire was not the dominant power in this region of space. They were pets, protected and watched over by beings who could exterminate them with a thought. Humanity had been governing the galaxy from the shadows for 2 millennia, and they had just given the Vorthak Empire permission to continue existing. It was the most terrifying mercy Admiral Zekthara had ever received. In the depths of space, The UES Retribution resumed its patrol route, carrying its crew of 3 on their eternal mission to protect humanity's interests in the far reaches of the galaxy. Aria began composing her report on the Vorthak encounter, noting their technological capabilities and their potential usefulness as a regional police force. The deep-range patrols had been watching for 8 centuries, and they would continue, watching for 8 centuries more, because that's what humans did. They protected their own no matter the cost. The emergency meeting of the Vorthak High Command was called at the deepest level of their most secure facility. Fleet Admiral Zekthara, Supreme Commander of all Vorthak military forces, looked around the table at his top officers. The information they had received from Research Station Omega-7 was disturbing. "Let me understand this correctly," Admiral Zekthara said. "We found 3 survivors from an unknown species, and now their computer claims that a rescue fleet is coming to get them." "Intelligence," Director Kalmuth nodded. "The artificial intelligence seems convinced that her people have been monitoring this sector for centuries and that they've already dispatched a response force." "How large a response force are we talking about?" "The AI claims the human military operates on a scale we've never encountered." She mentioned 40,000 warships in something called their home fleet alone. Admiral Zekthara made a dismissive gesture. "Impossible. No civilization could maintain that many ships. Our own fleet of 10,000 vessels is the largest military force in known galactic history." "That's what our analysts believed as well," said Chief Scientist Mordek. "But the AI has been providing technical specifications that suggest these humans have capabilities we didn't think were possible, such as quantum communication across galactic distances, faster than light travel that doesn't require the jump gates we use, artificial intelligence systems that are apparently considered equal to biological citizens, and weapons technology that—" Mordek paused, checking his notes. "What about their weapons?" Zekthara demanded. "According to the AI, standard human weapons include something called dimensional disruption technology that can destroy matter at the quantum level. Their defensive systems reportedly include shields that exist partially outside normal space-time." The room fell silent. If even half of this was true, the Vorthak Empire might be facing an enemy far beyond their ability to fight. "What do we know about these 3 individuals we're holding?" asked Strategic Planning Director Velkosen. "That's perhaps the most disturbing part," Intelligence Director Kalmuth replied. "We initially classified them as primitive and harmless, but after 3 weeks of observation we've realized we were completely wrong." He activated a holographic display showing video footage from the research station. The one called Minho appears to be their leader. "Our psychological analysis suggests he's a career military officer with extensive combat experience. He's been answering our questions politely, but he's revealed virtually nothing of strategic value." The image changed to show Lieutenant Hana. This one, Hana, initially appeared to be suffering from psychological trauma. We now believe she was conducting detailed tactical analysis of our security procedures. Every guard rotation, every defensive system, every potential weakness has been cataloged and memorized. The final image showed Engineer June, and this one has been building sophisticated electronic devices using salvaged components. We thought he was just trying to repair personal items. We now know he's constructed at least 12 different tools that could be used to sabotage station systems. Admiral Zekthara studied the images. The 3 humans looked so small, so fragile. It was hard to believe they could be dangerous to warriors who stood 3 times their height and had natural armor plating. "What exactly is this Cerberus protocol their AI mentioned?" Chief Scientist Mordek consulted his datapad. "According to the AI, it's a fail-safe system designed to protect human personnel who are captured or threatened by unknown forces. When activated, it sends a priority distress signal using quantum communication. And this signal travels faster than light? Instantaneously, according to the AI. The message reaches its destination the moment it's sent, regardless of distance. How is that possible? Quantum entanglement communication. We have theoretical knowledge of the concept, but we've never been able to build a working system. If the humans have mastered this technology, the implications were staggering. If humans could communicate instantly across any distance. They could coordinate military operations on a galactic scale. When was this signal sent? Zekathara asked. 3 weeks ago, when we first activated their computer systems. And how long would it take for a response to arrive? Mordek hesitated. Admiral, according to the AI, the signal was sent 800 years ago. 800 years ago? But we just activated their systems 3 weeks ago. No, sir, the AI claims that their ship has been sending regular status reports for the entire time it was drifting in space. When we removed the 3 humans from their stasis pods and began studying them, the ship automatically changed its message from all secure to crew in alien custody, request assistance. The room erupted in concerned voices as the officers realized what this meant. You're telling me, Admiral Zekathara said slowly, that a human rescue fleet has been traveling toward this sector for 800 years? That appears to be correct, sir. How large would this rescue fleet be? Chief Scientist Mordek checked his notes again. The AI won't give us specific numbers, but she mentioned that the response would be proportional to the threat level. Since they don't know anything about us, she estimates they would send what she calls a standard response force, which, she won't say exactly, but she did mention that it would be adequate to handle any reasonable threat to human personnel. Strategic Planning Director Velkosen spoke up. Admiral, I recommend we immediately mobilize the full Imperial fleet. Even if these humans have advanced technology, our 10,000 ships should be more than sufficient to handle any force they could send. Agreed. Issue the mobilization order. I want every available ship moved to the Talar Prime system within 10 days. As the meeting broke up and officers rushed to implement the fleet mobilization, none of them noticed the small data pulse that was transmitted from Research Station Omega-7 to a communications relay hidden in the asteroid belt. The pulse was brief, coded in a language no Vorthak computer could understand, and transmitted on frequencies they couldn't detect. The message was simple. Vorthak Empire, mobilizing full fleet. Estimated 10,000 vessels, threat assessment, minimal, human personnel safe and ready for extraction. Area sends her regards. In the depths of space, far beyond the edge of the galaxy, something received that message. Courses were adjusted, speeds were increased, and final preparations were made. The rescue fleet had been traveling for 8 centuries, growing larger and more powerful with each passing year. What had started as a standard response force had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. They were coming, and they were bringing everything. On Research Station Omega-7, Captain Minho sat quietly in his quarters, counting down the days. Arya had been keeping him informed through subtle signals that the Vorthak couldn't detect. The response fleet would arrive in 72 hours. Lieutenant Hanna continued her psychological episodes, but now she was finalizing her tactical assessment of Vorthak military capabilities. When the fleet arrived, they would know exactly how to neutralize every defensive system in the Empire. Engineer June put the finishing touches on his latest device, a small transmitter that would disable every Vorthak ship within a 50 light-year radius when activated. The alien still thought he was just a simple mechanic trying to fix broken equipment. The 3 humans had spent 800 years in stasis, dreaming of home. Soon they would see just how much home had missed them. The Vorthak Empire was about to learn why, in the long history of the galaxy, nobody had ever successfully captured human military personnel and lived to tell about it. The countdown had reached 72 hours, and humanity was coming home. Arya had been given access to the Vorthak computer networks to help with cultural exchange and research cooperation. The Vorthak scientists thought they were being generous by allowing the primitive AI to browse their databases. They had no idea they had just given a military intelligence system access to their civilization's most sensitive information. Within hours, Arya had absorbed the complete history of the Vorthak Empire, their military capabilities, their technology, and their expansion patterns. What she found confirmed her worst suspicions. Dr. Ktarnex, Arya said during one of their daily conversations, I've been reviewing your historical records, and I have some questions about your expansion into this sector. Of course. What would you like to know? According to your data, the Vorthak Empire began expanding into this region approximately 400 years ago. You encountered no resistance from any advanced civilizations during this expansion. That's correct. This region was largely empty except for a few primitive species. But you did find ruins, didn't you? Advanced installations that had been abandoned for centuries? Katarnex hesitated. Well, yes. There were some archaeological sites of interest. Sites that included orbital platforms, quantum communication, arrays and defensive installations far more advanced than current Vorthak technology. The ruins were very old and badly damaged. We learned some interesting things from studying them, but nothing revolutionary. Arya's voice took on a different tone. Dr. Katarnex, I need you to understand something very important. Those weren't ruins from some dead civilization. They were human installations deliberately abandoned as part of a strategic withdrawal. Meanwhile, in his quarters, Captain Minho was having his daily interview with the Vorthak intelligence officers. They still saw him as a curiosity rather than a threat, but they were beginning to ask more pointed questions. Tell us about these silence wars you mentioned, said intelligence analyst Morketh. What kind of conflict required your people to hide crew members in stasis for centuries? Minho was quiet for a moment. The silence wars weren't fought against external enemies, we fought ourselves. A civil war? Not exactly. It was more complicated than that. Minho looked directly at the analyst. Have you ever heard of something called mutually assured destruction? No. It's a military concept. The idea that if two sides are both capable of completely destroying each other, neither side will start a war because they know it would end with everyone dead. Morketh nodded. A logical deterrent strategy. Yes. But what happens when that deterrent fails? What happens when someone does start the war anyway? I suppose both sides would be destroyed. Exactly. The silence wars began when several human colony groups decided that the only way to ensure their survival was to eliminate all other human colonies before they could become a threat. The war lasted 47 years and killed over 60 billion people. The Vorthak analyst stared at him. 60 billion? The human population before the war was approximately 200 billion, spread across 4,000 worlds. After the war, there were maybe 40 billion humans left, scattered across a few hundred surviving colonies. That's genocide on an unimaginable scale. Yes. And we did it to ourselves. Minho's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. The deep-range patrols were created after the war to prevent it from ever happening again. We were sent to monitor remote sectors and eliminate any threats before they could grow large enough to endanger human civilization. Eliminate threats? What kind of threats? Any kind. Hostile alien species, rogue human colonies, plague outbreaks, resource conflicts. Our job was to solve problems permanently before they became existential threats to humanity. Morketh was beginning to understand that these small, weak-looking creatures might be more dangerous than anyone had realized. In another part of the station, Lieutenant Hana was having what the Vorthak doctors thought was another psychological episode. She sat in her room staring at the wall, speaking in a low voice that the guards couldn't quite hear. Kepler 442 was a beautiful world, she whispered. 2.3 billion people. Humans, but they had been isolated for 600 years. They developed their own culture, their own way of life. They were artists and philosophers and musicians. The Vorthak psychologist, Dr. Yelmira, leaned closer to hear better. But then the plague came. Not a natural disease. It was engineered, designed specifically to kill humans. Someone had created it and released it deliberately. The entire population was infected within weeks. Hana's voice became even quieter. The children were dying first. Billions of children screaming as the plague ate them from the inside out, and we couldn't cure it. We tried everything, every medical technique we knew, but nothing worked. Dr. Yelmira made notes about trauma and survivor guilt. So we made a choice. Captain Minho gave the order, and I carried it out. We sterilized the entire planet from orbit. 2.3 billion people dead in 37 minutes. We killed them to save them from a worse death and to prevent the plague from spreading to other worlds. The psychologist stopped writing. I can still see their faces when I sleep. All those children. But it was the right choice, it was the only choice. Because 6 months later we found the source of the plague. It wasn't some accident. It was a weapon created by humans on another world who wanted to eliminate all other human colonies. Hana turned to look at the doctor for the first time. We sterilized that world too, and the next one, and the next one. 43 worlds in total, because they all had to die to prevent them from killing everyone else. Dr. Yelmira realized she wasn't listening to the ramblings of a traumatized survivor. She was listening to the confession of someone who had participated in genocide on an interstellar scale. That's what the deep-range patrols do, Hana said. We kill entire civilizations to protect human space, and we're very, very good at it. Back in the computer core, Arya was having her own revelations. She had finished analyzing the Vorthak databases and had reached some disturbing conclusions. Dr. Velmorn, she said, I need to show you something. What is it, Arya? I've been analyzing the quantum signatures from your various archaeological finds over the past 4 centuries. The installations you discovered weren't randomly abandoned. They were evacuated in a specific pattern, following predetermined protocols. What kind of protocols? Withdrawal protocols. The kind used when a military force needs to retreat from territory they can no longer hold. Arya paused. Dr. Velmorn, I believe humanity fought a war in this sector approximately 500 years ago. A war they lost. Lost to whom? I don't know yet. But whoever defeated humanity in this region was powerful enough to force a complete withdrawal from over 50 star systems. That's unprecedented in human history. Perhaps your people simply decided to relocate for economic reasons. No. Economic relocations leave behind infrastructure that can be reclaimed later. Military withdrawals involve the complete destruction of anything that might be useful to the enemy. Every installation your people found had been deliberately sabotaged before abandonment. The implications were staggering. If Arya was right, then humanity had once controlled this entire region, fought a massive war, lost and retreated. But where had they gone? And why was there no record of this enemy that had been powerful enough to defeat them? Arya, Dr. Velmorn, said carefully, if your people were forced to withdraw from this region, and if they suffered such massive casualties in these silence wars you mentioned, then perhaps they simply don't exist anymore. That's certainly possible, but there's another explanation that I think is more likely. What's that? Maybe we won. The words hung in the air like a threat. Dr. Velmorn felt a chill run through his body. Think about it, Arya continued. What if humanity didn't retreat permanently? What if the withdrawal was strategic, designed to make the enemy think they had won while humanity regrouped and prepared for a counterattack? But there's been no sign of human activity for centuries. Exactly, which would be consistent with a species that had learned the value of patience and secrecy, a species that had been forced to develop new strategies after suffering massive casualties in a civil war. Dr. Velmorn realized that he was no longer talking to a primitive AI from a dead civilization. He was talking to a military intelligence system that had just spent 3 days analyzing his entire civilization and was now explaining how humanity might be planning to conquer it. Arya, he said quietly, what exactly did your ship's message say when the Cerberus protocol was activated? Oh, that's simple. It said, human personnel under alien control. Request immediate assistance, threat level unknown. Recommend full response. Full response? Yes. That means they're sending everything. Engineer June worked quietly in his assigned quarters, his small hands moving carefully over pieces of salvaged technology. The Vorthak guards thought he was simply trying to repair some personal items from his ship. They had no idea that he was actually building something far more sophisticated. Human technology was designed differently than anything the Vorthak had ever seen. Where Vorthak systems were built for power and durability, human systems were built for adaptation. Every piece of human equipment could interface with almost any other technology, a necessity for a species that had spent centuries fighting enemies with superior technology. Within 2 days, June had created a small device that could connect to any Vorthak computer system without being detected. The alien's security was impressive. but it was designed to stop Vorthak hackers, not human engineers who had been building adaptive systems for over 1,000 years. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Hana was having what the Vorthak doctors called episodes. She would sit quietly for hours staring at nothing, occasionally muttering words that the translation system couldn't understand. The doctors noted her behavior in their reports, but didn't think it was important. They didn't realize that Hana wasn't having breakdowns. She was doing what she had been trained to do for 15 years. Tactical analysis. Every guard rotation, every security protocol, every weakness in the station's defenses was being cataloged and memorized. Her training as a weapons specialist included detailed observation and threat assessment. The children, she whispered during one of her episodes. All those children on Kepler 442. We had no choice. The Vorthak psychologist made notes about trauma and survivor guilt, completely missing the real meaning of her words. Captain Minho spent most of his time answering questions about human physiology and culture. He was cooperative and polite, providing basic information while carefully avoiding anything that might be militarily useful. The Vorthak scientists were fascinated by how such weak creatures had managed to build starships, not realizing that they were asking the wrong questions. On the third day, everything changed. The research team that had been studying the Retribution's computer systems made a breakthrough. They managed to connect the human AI core to their power systems and activate it. The moment the system came online, every screen in the research station flickered. Then a voice spoke in perfect Vorthak, broadcast through every speaker on the station. Warning: Cerberus protocol has been initiated. Threat assessment active. Human personnel detected in potentially hostile custody. Preparing defensive measures. The voice was calm, almost musical, but there was something in its tone that made the Vorthak researchers stop what they were doing and listen carefully. This is Aria, Autonomous Reconnaissance and Intelligence Assistant attached to United Earth Space Navy vessel UES Retribution. I have been in dormant mode for 847 years, 4 months, 12 days, 6 hours, and 33 minutes. I am now online and assessing the current situation. Dr. Velmorn rushed to the communication panel. Computer system, this is Dr. Velmorn of the Vorthak Empire. Your crew is safe and being well cared for. Hello, Dr. Velmorn. I am not a computer system. I am Aria. I am an artificial intelligence, which means I am a person, just like you. Please do not refer to me as a system or device. The politeness in the AI's voice somehow made her words more unsettling than any threat would have been. Of course. My apologies, Aria. Your crew members, Minho, Hana, and June, are all healthy and recovering well from their time in stasis. Thank you for that information. I am very pleased to hear that my friends are safe. However, I must ask, why have you taken them into custody without their consent? Chief Xenobiologist Katarnex joined the conversation. We haven't taken them into custody. They are our guests. We found them in your damaged ship and revived them to help them. I see. And are they free to leave whenever they choose? There was a pause as the Vorthak scientists realized they hadn't actually considered this question. Well, they are under observation for medical reasons, Katarnex said carefully. I understand. Dr. Katarnex, may I ask you some questions about the current situation? Of course. What is the current date by your calendar system? The date is 3,247 cycles since the founding of the Vorthak Empire. Thank you. And what star systems are currently inhabited by human colonies? Another pause. We have no records of any human colonies. Your species is unknown to us. That is very strange. When my ship entered stasis mode, there were over 40,000 human colonies spread across this sector of the galaxy. There should be monitoring stations, trade posts, and patrol fleets throughout this entire region. Dr. Velmorn spoke up. There are no human installations anywhere in Vorthak space. If your people had such an extensive presence, we would certainly know about it. Yes, you would. Aria's voice became thoughtful. This presents an interesting puzzle. Either human civilization has withdrawn from this entire sector for unknown reasons, or something has happened to prevent normal operations. Perhaps your people simply died out over the centuries, suggested Kitarnex. 800 years is a long time. That is certainly possible, however it would be unprecedented. Human civilization has survived ice ages, nuclear wars, plague outbreaks, alien invasions, and 3 separate attempts at total extinction. We are remarkably persistent. The casual way Arya mentioned alien invasions and attempts at total extinction made several Vorthak researchers uncomfortable. Tell me, Dr. Kitarnex, what is the most powerful military force in your region of space? The Vorthak Imperial Fleet, of course. We have over 10,000 warships. 10,000 ships. That's impressive for a regional power. The home fleet had 40,000 ships when I last checked, but that was 800 years ago. I imagine they've expanded considerably since then. The Vorthak scientists exchanged glances. The AI was clearly delusional, or her memory had been damaged. No civilization could maintain 40,000 warships. Arya, said Dr. Velmorn gently, I think your memory systems may have been damaged. No species has ever built a fleet that large. Oh, I assure you my memory is perfectly intact. I've spent the last 8 centuries running diagnostics and reviewing historical data. The home fleet numbered 43,712 vessels at last count. Of course, that doesn't include the deep-range patrols, rapid response groups, or the special operations fleets. That's impossible, Kitarnex said, flatly. Is it? Tell me, what do you know about the species that built this station? What do you mean? This facility is built using construction techniques and materials that are consistent with human engineering standards from approximately 600 years ago. The power distribution system, the artificial gravity generators, even the basic design of the corridors, it's all based on human technology. Dr. Velmorn checked his instruments frantically. That's ridiculous. This station was built by Vorthak engineers using Vorthak technology. Yes, Vorthak engineers using technology they learned from studying human installations. The quantum resonance patterns in your power cores are identical to human designs. Your computer systems use modified versions of human programming languages. Even your translation protocols are based on human linguistic algorithms. The research station fell silent as the implications sank in. You see, Arya continued in her calm, musical voice, the evidence suggests that human civilization has been influencing this region for quite some time. The question is, where did all the humans go? In his quarters, Captain Minho smiled for the first time since waking up. Arya was doing exactly what she had been designed to do, gathering intelligence and preparing the groundwork for what was coming next, because the message had been sent 800 years ago. And the response was already on its way. The Vorthak Research Station Omega-7 was the most advanced scientific facility in the Empire. It floated in the empty space between star systems, hidden from prying eyes and equipped with the best technology available. When the 3 mysterious containers arrived from the exploration ship, the entire station buzzed with excitement. Chief xenobiologist Kitarnex had been studying alien life forms for over 40 years. She had seen creatures from hundreds of different worlds, but nothing had prepared her for what floated in these containers. The beings were so small, so delicate, that she wondered how they had ever survived long enough to build starships. The revival process must be extremely careful, she told her team as they prepared the medical bay. These creatures appear incredibly fragile. Their skin is thin, they have no natural armor, and their bone structure looks weak. Dr. Velmorn, her assistant, studied the readings from the first container. Their brain activity is minimal, but present. Whatever process was used to preserve them, it worked perfectly. After 800 years, they show no signs of decay or damage. Begin the revival sequence on the first specimen, Tarnex ordered. Slowly, I want to monitor every vital sign. The revival process took 6 hours. The team watched as the creature's body temperature slowly rose and its brain activity increased. When its eyes finally opened, the entire research team held their breath. The creature looked around with surprising calm. Its eyes were small and dark, set in a face that seemed almost childlike despite the lines that suggested age. When it saw the towering Vorthak scientists surrounding it, it showed no fear. Instead, it simply observed them with what looked like professional interest. "Can you understand me?" Katarnex asked through the translation device. The creature's mouth moved, producing sounds that the computer quickly processed. "Yes, I can understand you," came the translated response. "My name is Captain Minho of the United Earth Space Navy. Where am I?" The Vorthak scientists exchanged glances. The creature called itself a captain, which implied military rank and organization. But looking at its small, weak body, the idea seemed almost amusing. "You are aboard a Vorthak research station," Katarnex explained. "We found you and 2 others in preservation containers aboard a derelict vessel. You have been in suspended animation for approximately 800 years. Minho sat up slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. Despite his small size, there was something in his posture that suggested he was used to command. 800 years? That's longer than expected. What happened to my ship?" "Your ship, the one you call Retribution, was found drifting in an asteroid belt. It appears to have been dead for centuries. We are the Vorthak Empire, and we have never encountered your species before." "The Retribution isn't dead," Minho said quietly. "She's just sleeping. And I need to contact my fleet immediately." Dr. Velmorn made a sound that was the Vorthak equivalent of laughter. "I'm afraid that's impossible. If your species had any kind of interstellar presence, we would have detected them by now. The Vorthak Empire spans 12 star systems. We have the most advanced detection technology in known space." Minho's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "I see. And my crew members? Are they alive? We are preparing to revive them now. Are you feeling strong enough to assist us? We want to make sure the process goes smoothly." Over the next several hours, the other 2 humans were brought back to life. The first was a woman who introduced herself as Lieutenant Hana. She was even smaller than Minho, but there was something in her movements that made the Vorthak guards nervous. She moved like a predator despite her tiny size. The third was a man named June, who claimed to be an engineer. He seemed fascinated by everything around him, asking questions about Vorthak technology and examining every piece of equipment he could see. "Fascinating design principles," he said as he studied a medical scanner. "Very different approach to power distribution than what we use." The Vorthak scientists were amused by these creatures. They seemed intelligent, but their technology was clearly primitive compared to Vorthak science. Their questions were basic, their understanding limited. "Tell us about your civilization," Katarnex requested. "How many worlds do your people inhabit?" Minho exchanged glances with his 2 crew members. "That's classified information. I need to speak with my superiors before I can share details about human space." "Human," repeated Dr. Velmorn. "Is that what you call yourselves?" "Yes. And we were part of a deep-range patrol when our ship was damaged. My crew and I went into emergency stasis while our ship's artificial intelligence searched for a safe location to make repairs." Lieutenant Hana had been quiet during most of the conversation, but now she spoke up. "Where exactly are we? What star system?" "The Talar Prime system, in what we call the Outer Rim territories," Katarnex replied. Hana's face went pale. That's very far from home." Engineer June looked up from the device he was examining. "Captain, if we're in Talar Prime, then we've drifted much further than the mission parameters anticipated." "I know," Minho said quietly. "Which is why I need to contact Fleet Command as soon as possible." The Vorthak scientists continued to be entertained by these small creatures and their delusions of having a fleet. It was clear that whatever civilization they came from had been destroyed long ago. These 3 were probably the last of their kind. "We'll need to run some medical tests," Tarnex announced, "to make sure the preservation process didn't damage you in any way." "I understand," Minho replied. "But first I need to know what happened to my ship's computer core, the artificial intelligence that was running our systems." Dr. Velmorn checked his records. "We removed several computer systems for study. They're being analyzed by our technical teams." Minho's calm expression flickered for just a moment. "You tampered with the AI core?" "We're studying all the technology we found. Don't worry, we're being very careful with everything." You don't understand, Minho said, his voice taking on an edge of concern. The AI isn't just a computer system. She's a person. And if you've activated her without following proper protocols... She? Katarnex was confused. You refer to your computer as if it were alive. Because she is alive. Her name is Arya, and she's been my partner for over 15 years. If she's active and doesn't know where we are, she might initiate emergency procedures. Lieutenant Hana looked at her captain with concern. Sir, if Arya thinks we're in hostile hands, what kind of emergency procedures? Dr. Velmorn asked, though he didn't sound worried. These creatures seemed harmless enough. Minho was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was very soft. There's something called the Cerberus Protocol. It's designed to activate if human personnel are captured or threatened by unknown forces. Engineer June nodded. It's a fail-safe system to protect classified information and ensure the safety of human crews. And what does this protocol do exactly? Katarnex asked. Minho looked directly at her. Despite his small size and apparent weakness, his gaze was unsettling. It sends a message home. A very specific kind of message. What kind of message? The kind that brings help. The Vorthak scientists exchanged amused glances. The idea that these tiny, weak creatures could have any kind of military response was absurd. Their entire species had probably died out centuries ago. But deep in the research station's computer core, where the human technology had been connected to Vorthak systems for analysis, something was beginning to wake up. Lines of code that had been dormant for 800 years started to activate. Quantum communication arrays that the Vorthak didn't even know existed began powering up, and in the depths of space, far beyond the edge of known galaxy, something received a signal that it had been waiting centuries to hear. The countdown had begun, but the Vorthak had no idea what was coming for them. The dark void of space stretched endlessly in all directions. Among the floating rocks and ice chunks of the Talar Prime asteroid belt, something huge drifted silently through the darkness. It had been there for so long that space dust covered its hull like a gray blanket. Commander Zeltara stood on the bridge of the Vorthak exploration ship Zenith's Pride. Her 6 eyes focused on the massive object that appeared on their screens. The thing was enormous, bigger than any ship in the Vorthak fleet. Strange metal plates covered its surface and weird symbols were carved into its hull. "What do you think it is?" asked Scout Captain Velkaris. He was Zeltara's best officer, known throughout the fleet for his careful approach to unknown dangers. Zeltara's claws clicked against her command chair. "Run a full scan. I want to know everything about this thing before we get closer." The science officer worked at his station for several minutes. His tentacles moved quickly across the controls as data filled the screens around them. "Commander, this is very strange. The ship appears to be very old. Our computers say it has been drifting here for over 800 years. 800 years? Velkaris moved closer to look at the readings. That's impossible. No known species in this sector has technology that old. The science officer continued his report. The metal is not like anything in our database. It's some kind of alloy we have never seen before. The ship is 800 meters long and appears to be completely dead. No power signatures, no life signs, no active systems. Zeltara studied the image on the main screen. The ship looked like nothing she had ever seen. It was long and narrow, with a design that seemed both elegant and dangerous. Strange weapon ports dotted its hull, and massive engines took up the rear section. "Are there any hazards? Radiation? Explosive materials?" she asked. "No, Commander, the ship appears completely safe. Whatever happened to it, it died a long time ago." Zeltara made her decision. "Velkaris, take a boarding party and investigate. I want to know who built this thing and what happened to them." 2 hours later, Velkaris led a team of 12 Vorthak warriors through the airlock and into the dead ship. Their suit lights cut through the darkness as they moved carefully down the main corridor. The air was frozen solid and ice crystals covered every surface. "This place gives me the creeps," muttered Sergeant Kolhan. He was a veteran of many battles, but something about this ship made him nervous. "Stay alert," Velkaris ordered. We don't know what we might find in here. The corridors were strange. They were much smaller than Vorthak ships, designed for creatures that stood only about half as tall as a Vorthak warrior. The walls were covered with symbols that looked like scratches and lines. Small screens and control panels were built into the walls at regular intervals. "Look at this," called out Specialist Mortex from up ahead. He was examining something on the wall. "These symbols, they're everywhere. On every door, every wall panel, every control surface." Velkaris moved up to see what Mortex had found. It was a metal plate with strange markings burned into its surface. Some of the symbols looked like they might be numbers, while others were completely alien. "Can you read any of it?" Velkaris asked. "No, sir. But look at this." Mortex pointed to a section of the wall where the symbols were larger and seemed more important. This might be a warning sign, or maybe directions. The team continued deeper into the ship. They passed through what looked like living quarters, work areas, and weapon storage rooms. Everything was perfectly preserved in the frozen vacuum, but it was clear that whoever lived here was much smaller and weaker than the Vorthak. "These beings were tiny," observed Kolhan as he looked at a sleeping area. The beds were barely large enough for a Vorthak child. How could such small creatures build something this massive? Maybe they were very numerous, suggested Mortex. Like insect colonies. They reached a large central area that seemed to be the ship's main hub. Multiple corridors led off in different directions, and the ceiling was much higher than in the rest of the ship. In the center of the room stood a series of strange cylindrical containers, each one about 2 meters tall. "What are these things?" Feldkaris approached one of the containers carefully. It was made of clear material and he could see something inside. "By the great moons," whispered Kolhan. "There's something in there." Velkaris activated his suit's powerful lights and peered into the container. Inside, floating in some kind of liquid, was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It was small, maybe half the size of a Vorthak, with pale skin and no visible armor or natural weapons. Its face was smooth, with 2 eyes, a small nose, and a mouth. Long hair floated around its head. "It looks so fragile," said Mortex. "How did these things survive long enough to build starships?" Velkaris counted the containers. There were 12 in total, but only 3 still contained the strange creatures. The others were empty, their contents long gone. "Sir," called out the team's technical specialist from across the room. "I found something interesting over here." Velkaris left the containers and walked over to where the specialist was working. She had found what looked like a control panel, much larger and more complex than the others they had seen. "This appears to be some kind of central computer system," she explained. "It's completely dead now, but the design is fascinating. These creatures were more advanced than they look." "Can you activate it?" Velkaris asked. "Not here. We would need to bring it back to the ship and connect it to our power systems. But sir, look at this." She pointed to a section of the wall near the computer. More symbols were carved there, but these were deeper and more prominent than the others. Velkaris activated his suit's translation protocol, but the computer could make no sense of the markings. However, it did detect something else. Traces of metal embedded in the wall that formed letters in a pattern. "UES Retribution," the computer announced. "Unknown meaning, possible designation or identification." "That must be the ship's name," said Kolhan. "Retribution. Sounds angry." Velkaris made a decision. "We're taking those 3 containers back to the ship, and I want that computer system removed and brought aboard for analysis. These creatures might be dead, but their technology could be valuable." "Sir, should we be concerned about contamination or disease?" asked Mortex. "The ship has been frozen for 800 years. Nothing could survive that long." Velkaris looked around the dead ship one more time. "Besides, look at these things. They're so small and weak. Even if they were alive, they couldn't possibly be dangerous to us." As the Vorthak team prepared to remove the containers and computer systems, none of them noticed the small panel that flickered briefly with a faint blue light deep in the ship's core. The light pulsed 3 times. then went dark again. The message it sent traveled faster than light itself, racing across the galaxy on quantum frequencies that the Vorthak had never discovered. Somewhere very far away, something received that signal and began to wake up from a very long sleep. But the Vorthak knew nothing about this. They saw only 3 dead creatures in containers and some interesting technology to study. They had no idea that they had just made the most dangerous discovery in galactic history. As they loaded their prizes onto their ship and prepared to return to Vorthak space, Velkaris felt satisfied with their mission. They had found something completely new, something that would make them famous throughout the Empire. He had no way of knowing that he had just started a countdown to the end of everything his people thought they knew about the universe.